How's every little body today? Good. Good. So, January is the month that we go back to basics, and that is kind of go back and look at the fundamental, the foundational elements of this philosophy and faith and way of life that we call the science of mind and spirit. And I mentioned last week that this is year 7 or 8 or something like that, and sometimes if you do something over and over, it's not quite so fresh, and so every year I try to find a fresh way to enter into this, to reanimate it for myself so that I can animate it for you. And the way that I'm doing that this month is I am doing all the talks without the use of jargon. So no specialized science of mind words. I did pretty good the first week. And the other thing that I'm doing is we're looking at the 7 basic theological questions and looking at how the science of mind and spirit views those theological questions. So I'm going to review the questions for you real quickly. The first question, what is the nature of ultimate reality? What is the nature of humankind? What's the nature of the world? Where did we come from? Where are we ultimately going? How do we experience this ultimate reality? And finally, why does suffering exist? So I'm going to touch on 3 of those today. The nature of the world, the nature of humankind, and how we experience ultimate reality. I'm not going to talk exhaustively about any of them, but I'm going to try to remind us what this deal is about and how we can tap in. I'm looking around. Okay, so the only thing I feel the need to recap from my last talk is to remember that the divine or God or spirit, whatever you want to call it, is a presence and a power/principle, not a person. So it's not a person, it doesn't have all the personality quirks, the pettiness, etc. of a human. Okay. So just like during my last talk, I'm going to give you a quote to kind of frame what I'm talking about today. And this, like the last one, is a Sufi quote. God sleeps in the rock, dreams in the plant, moves in the animal, and awakens in the human. Sleeps in the rock, dreams in the plant, moves in the animal, awakens in the human. So let's start with the nature of the world. What we were taught, of course, if you grew up in a Judeo-Christian culture, that this was a fallen realm, etc., etc. I want you to just mentally wish that away. And remember that thing they taught you about the Big Bang? Yeah. Thank you. So rather than the Big Bang, I want you to think of the origins of the physical universe as a big blossom. So no more Big Bang, big blossom. And there's a reason for that, because there's a pattern in a blossom that's not there in a bang. Now, the world is not, in my understanding and according to Ernest Holmes, is not operating according to a plan. There's no divine plan other than what Ernest Holmes would say, other than freedom. But there are definitely patterns, right? So no more Big Bang. We're going to work with the idea of a big blossom. Now, If ultimate reality is that invisible thing, or it's not a thing that we can touch, then there has to be a process by which that ultimate thing expresses itself into form. When that ultimate that is unseen moves itself into form, it's expressing itself into visibility. So this idea of God actually came to earth, became earth, is the cosmos, is everything. Oh, okay, so I'm going to say this, and I'm going to say this is Ernest Holmes' quote, so I get to use the jargon. The universe is the manifest body of God. So what we can see and touch and feel and move and smell and taste is the physical representation of the unseen ultimate reality. We're going to call that the macrocosm, the big picture. And so the nature of the world is very simple. It's God in form, spirit in form. Not some fallen realm, but actually the body of the divine. It's like a full-time job to remember that and treat it that way, isn't it? All right. So if that is the nature of the world, then what is the nature of humankind? Anyone? We are, as I've heard it eloquently put, God is all that I am, but I am not all that God is. So we're going to call that the microcosm. So I'm a microcosmic expression of the divine, as are you. Now, remember that thing I started with where I said sleeps in the rock, dreams in the plant, moves in the animal, awakens in humankind? So there's this, let me set that right there for a minute. There's a teaching tool in the Foundations of the Science of Mind class, a metaphor to understand this, the unseen through the process to the seen. And it's called seed, soil, plant. Okay, so remember, if the macro is the divine expressing as all of life, then the micro is what is unseen in me becoming seen. And the easiest way to understand that is the seed is, say, my thoughts about myself or my beliefs about myself, unseen. And then through a process, I see it reflected back to me in the way that I treat myself, the way that you treat me, in the situations that I encounter, the opportunities that I take advantage of. So that's the plant, the physical representation of the thing that started out invisible. We good so far? Mm-hmm. Okay. But here's the thing. Because the divine has awakened in us, we have this really specialized ability that I'm not going to say all mammals don't have, but most mammals don't. Or most of life doesn't. And that's that we're not experiencing life by default. So in other words, we're strictly a victim of the pattern or a beneficiary of the pattern that we've experienced up until now. We actually have a choice. And we can choose to change the invisible so that we have a different physical experience. And therein lies the hope and the salvation and the glory, as they say. Why is that? Well, because for most of us, there were some people in our past, maybe there's some chemicals in our brain, maybe there's the culture we were born into. So in other words, things that appear to be outside of our control. And because we are learning machines, we absorb these patterns. We absorb the thoughts, feelings, beliefs, attitudes of the people who raised us, of the culture that envelops us. And that's what we're handed. And so if we're not awake as a human, typically what we experience is more of the same. So we're not actually awakening to our choices. We may not even realize we have a choice, right? So the really cool thing about this philosophy, as far as I'm concerned, and it's really easy to encapsulate, we call this new thought. A new thought produces a new condition. A new idea of who and what we are and what our inherent worth is produces a very different life. As a child, you know that thing where you, like, maybe you don't, maybe it's just me. Probably not, but like, my parents, they weren't perfect parents for me. They weren't perfect parents. They were okay people. But I got some ideas about life from my parents. Some of which I choose to keep. So let me give you an example of that. I have a very playful nature. Very playful. Problematically playful, some might say. But I got that from my mom. And despite the traumas of World War II that happened to her in the Philippines, she had a playful spirit, which I think she got from her dad. All right, and so when I grew up, and then I got sober from drugs and alcohol, and then I dove into therapy, my mother's playfulness that lives in me is great for me. It's not a seed that I need to, or a plant that I need to pluck out and get rid of and plant something new. I like it. I want to keep it. I choose to keep it. However, my mother had some other qualities that were very toxic to me. And I didn't want them anymore. I didn't need them to protect me. They did not bring me joy or creativity or peace or happiness or possibility. And so those were the ones that I had to say, okay, I don't choose this. I don't choose this. This is not the experience of life I want to have. And then begin the work of pulling those plants up so that there's space for another seed to be planted. You know, what we teach about what's going on in our lives and what the nature of humankind is, that we are essentially creative beings, that's pretty much it. This is a very, very simple philosophy. It's a very positive one. But simple is not the same thing as easy, right? Dadgummit. And so the real spiritual journey, the real spiritual work is to look squarely at what is invisible in us. Thoughts, beliefs, actions, or thoughts, beliefs, attitudes, feelings. Decide whether they're serving us. And if they're not, welcome the change. Right? When I first got to New Thought, there was a lot of people that believed that like you had to do this thought policing yourself. Like you could never have another negative thought. In fact, I think there's a book called You Can't Afford the Luxury of a Negative Thought. That's never, maybe that's true for some people. That would be like me setting me up for failure. right? There are the patterns. Sometimes they're deep, sometimes they're shallow. The deeper there are, the deeper and older a pattern is, a mistaken, a seed that you don't want anymore, that's given rise to a plant you don't want anymore. The older it is, in my experience, and I don't want to limit you, then sometimes you have to work at it a little bit more tenaciously. Does that make sense? Right? And so, be not discouraged, people of good faith. It does happen. Sometimes it takes longer than we'd like. It's okay. That's all we got is time. Okay. So the final question I want to talk about is, how do we experience ultimate reality? Now, what I would normally say right here is that is why we have spiritual practices. And that is completely true. So things like meditation, chanting, affirmative prayer / spiritual mind treatment, service, giving. All of these things are ways to get into the flow of this unseen good. That's normally what I'd say. But I want to make it really, really, really simple. The biggest barrier to your good and mine is the habitual refusal of it. I'm going to say that again. The biggest barrier to your good, whatever that is for you. So joy, let's use the 7 from Thomas Troward. Love, light, life, peace, power, beauty, joy. However it is that you particularize those things in your life. The biggest barrier is your refusal to accept. Why? Maybe your parents told you weren't worth it. Maybe you had maybe like me, you had some sort of learning disability and you got the idea you were stupid. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know why we often learn to refuse help and love and change. But we do. So yes, spiritual practices are a great way to access this ultimate reality as it lives around us, within us. But here's the bottom line. This is what I would say. Court it, contemplate it, and allow it. Court it, contemplate it, and allow it. I really like the phrase court it because there's something so, I don't know, genteel maybe? It's like this loving attention to something, right? And you're beckoning to it. You're extending yourself in love and in possibility. And so, when I first got sober, a sponsor told me, what you need to do is you need to wake up in the morning and say a prayer. And I'm like, I don't pray. I don't believe in anything. She's like, let me tell you, there is a God and you're not it. And all you need to do is wake up and invite that thing that you don't believe in to be in your day with you. So, I'm almost 21 years sober now, so something in that worked, even though I didn't believe it. So when I say court it, maybe it's just simply you invite an awareness in yourself that there's a larger reality. It doesn't have to be any more sophisticated than that. It doesn't even cost you the price of dinner, right? So you open up a space by attending to just reminding yourself that there's a greater reality and that it's good. And then you look for it. You look for its expression. You contemplate it. Well, what is good to me? Well, what is beautiful to me? Well, what is loving to me? Where do I see that? You see, you give it space between your ears and in your heart to take root. And then you have to allow it. And so the way to allow it is to allow it. Right? And if you can't allow it, tell yourself you're allowing it. Right? What do I mean by that? Sometimes, even though we believe in a universe or in a spirit or a God that goes from the invisible to the visible, sometimes you just got to move your mouth and your feelings follow. Right? So sometimes you say, I'm going to allow spiritual reality into my day-to-day. And then a voice in your head goes, no, you're not. No, you're not. Because check Twitter. Or, I can't believe she did that last night. Or whatever, right? And then you go, I'm going to allow it. I'm going to allow it because it's good. Ernest Holmes says that if you will spend 10 minutes a day doing this, it will change your whole life. And I think he's right. Because see, what we're doing is we're training ourselves to court this experience of ultimate reality and see it everywhere we look. I guarantee you, if you go look for what's screwed up in the world, you're going to see a screwed up world. And if you go look for what's good in the world, you're going to see it. Is it perfect? Well, it includes everything, so it's perfect, but it's not without error, that's for sure. So the nature of the world is that it's becoming more and more conscious. From the rock. Oh, what comes after rock, y'all? Thanks. From the rock to the plant, to the animal, to the human. And the nature of us is that as we awaken to it, we can live in partnership with it. And we have that specialized ability, because we're awake, that we can make choices. It's simple. And sometimes it's easy and sometimes it's not. But it's worth it. It's the only journey I've ever found that's really worth my time. Truly. And it works. And let me tell you how it works. Let me leave you with this final impression of how it works. And then we'll pray. When I was a little girl, I had a lot of trauma. Most of you guys know that. And I kept a lot of secrets because I was ashamed, and I spent a lot of time alone. And the rest of the time I spent with this angry veneer because I didn't want to be hurt. But God, I was lonely, because the thing about putting up a wall is it might keep others out, but it keeps you in, you know? And so I grew up with that, with this belief that I was stupid and that I was ugly and that I was unlovable and I didn't want anybody to see me. And I lived that way for a very, very, very long time, looking like I was normal, sort of, except the scowl. And I lived that way into my 30s when I finally got sober. And I got sober because I allowed something, even though I didn't believe it. I always tell people I got sober by praying to a God I didn't believe in for something that I didn't want. Right? So that started the journey for me. And then I found the science of mind and spirit, and I began to use these spiritual tools. And the people in my life that did not support love disappeared. They just disappeared. I didn't have to kick them out. I didn't have to take an inventory, have any of that. There was nowhere for them to plug in. And what they were replaced with was people showing up, loving me, and people that I could love. And there wasn't any one moment that it happened. It happened by degrees. And I woke up one day, and my life was full. And here you are. Something that I couldn't have allowed, wouldn't have accepted, didn't believe in, didn't trust. And here you are. So thank you today for showing me that I've done some work. I want to show you that you've done some work too. Let's pray. So keeping this very simple, very basic. There is one life, there's one ultimate reality. That life is the life of God or Spirit, whatever inadequate word we want to use for it. One life, and that invisible reality gives itself moment by moment into this physical reality called life that we experience. One life, God's life. And because there is nothing outside of that life, it must be my life right here, right now, and the life of everyone. That life is good. That life is whole. That life is love. And I accept it. I allow the invisible reality to show me its beauty everywhere I look, to show me its abundance everywhere I look, to show me its grace everywhere I look. And so I court the awareness and the presence. I contemplate, and I allow it to live and move and have being consciously as I choose the experience of life I want to have. And because I know there is nothing, absolutely nothing extraordinary about me, that this is true for everyone, because it's not about a person thing, it's not about a situation thing, it's about the nature of ultimate reality thing. For this and so much more, for every face and every challenge, for every doubt and every renewal of faith, I say thank you. Thank you, Mother, Father, God. Thank you, life. Just simply thank you. It's a good day. And so it is.